Hi, I'm Carissa Trenton. I work with Family Service Regina in Communications and Fund Development, and this is Coffee with a Counselor. Today we'll be chatting with Dillon Lewchuk, and focusing on youth marginalization and the impact of COVID-19 on its population. Dillon is graduated with a master's in art therapy from Concordia University in 2020. He began working with Family Service Regina in August of 2020 as a counselor and art therapist. And through his work, he aims to provide safety, connection, and empowerment for his clients. Hi, Dillon.
Hi, Carissa. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I miss seeing your face. I only got to see you, twice since you've been working with us, just because of COVID, and I'm working from home. So how is it over there? Are you guys busy?
So at Family Service Regina, we are beyond busy. We are finding creative ways to meet the needs of the Regina community. We're offering some in-person counseling, Zoom counseling, telephone counseling. We're trying to think of groups that we can help support people in need. And so we've really rose up to the challenge and been doing the best we can.
We really did adapt quite well with that, hey, implementing Zoom and phone counseling, which is awesome. And also with the new launch of the Boost group for youth that you and Christine have kind of been working on. So in talking about youth, maybe we should start talking about marginalized youth. So what characterizes marginalized youth?
Yeah, so when we talk about marginalization, we're really looking at a person's intersectionalities. And what that is that the different social locators that our identities are made up by. So our identities are made up by like the gender that we identify with, our class, our race, our religion, our sexual identity, our nationality, and disability. And so it's important to look at those social locators and those intersectionalities to see which ones are going to increase our chances of experiencing discrimination and or disadvantages as we make our way through our life.
Yeah, so how has COVID-19 impacted youth and more specifically marginalized youth?
So I just want to start with like how it's impacted everyone, and then we'll focus in on that. But collectively, we've all been experiencing different degrees of heightened anxiety, nervousness about others. So who is safe? Who can I trust? Fear, which can happen in public places, who's following the COVID rules, who's not, who's wearing a mask, who's not wearing it properly, overcrowding, a lot of fear stirs up. A lot of
shopping in general is anxiety ridden for me. So
it's really changed our environment of being in public because public doesn't feel safe anymore for a lot of people.
Very true. Yeah.
And then a lot of people have been experiencing a lot of disconnection from friends, from family, our partners, and like really our support system that helps us get through difficult times. And so then as well, heightened stress about the unknown, because we're social beings. We like to know what comes next, and we don't know. And then one of the big things that I'm seeing in the counseling room is like that fatigue. And so the fatigue comes from various forms of lacking that meaningful connection, lacking physical touch. Like we're like connecting beings, and like to not have a hug, or like to think about the last time you've hugged a friend or whatnot, because now it's not safe. Like it's really done a number on us. And until we like bring that into awareness, we might not even realize how much we need that physical touch.
That physical touch is my love language. So I can't imagine not being able to hug my son or not being able to hug my partner. And a lot of people have been in isolation, and, you know, if they're just single people, they might be able to travel to one household. But yeah, it's been pretty awful for everybody.
Yeah, and especially like parents trying to navigate having young children and trying to explain to a child that you can't hug grandma and grandpa right now, and they're not understanding, right? And then they kind of feel like rejected or unsure, and who's safe, who's not safe. So it's been really difficult at so many different levels around that physical touch. And then again, with fatigue, a loss of purpose or meaning in our daily lives, right? And I'm seeing this with youth who are like, am I even going to go to university? Is there even a point of studying in high school because universities are closing or they're adapting to Zoom? I don't want to do it that way. And just like losing that like internal motivation, which is really difficult to see, as well as Zoom and technology fatigue with a lot of people working or doing school online, like for 8 hours on Zoom. That's really difficult.
It is, yeah.
The isolation fatigue of not seeing friends or family, or even being isolated in a house where you can't see the person because of COVID or whatnot. Change fatigue, in that numbers go down, we get really excited, it looks like we have hope, and then everything goes back to isolation, and then we're like disappointed, or expectations are like pulled away from us, and that change fatigue really gets to us.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is coping fatigue. Like, we've been doing our best, finding creative ways to cope, but after so long, we're just tired of coping. We are benefiting from no reward, and we just want things to go back to normal, and that's just not the case right now.
Yeah, that's really it too, right? Like, everybody's been, it's been over a year of COVID-19, and I think people are desperate for things to go back to normal, but I don't know that there ever will be a normal. My partner and I were watching America's Funniest Home Videos last night, and we were like, look how close they are to each other, all the people in the audience. Could you imagine, like, in another year, we're going to be like, oh, you're way too close. So I totally see that. It's scary, really. So I'm hoping that people are utilizing our services and coming to you and, getting support.
And the other thing is, like, yes, we focus on all of those like negatives, but the one thing that has really opened up, I think, for a lot of services is that if someone's feeling unwell and they had an in-person appointment and they're able to call because maybe they're feeling unwell, maybe their car broke down, maybe something happened in their personal lives and they just can't make it to the office, within 2 minutes, we can quickly switch it to Zoom or telephone and do a whole counseling session, and they didn't miss that. So like, it's that increased access that I really see such a benefit in, that this has forced us into, and more people are actually accessing services because it's lowering stigma that they don't need to come into a therapy office. They can be in their car or in a private space in their home, and it lowers the pressure. Youth in particular, and me and many other mental health professionals are noticing that the intensity of the pandemic has impacted youth mental health and well-being like drastically. And so when we're looking at like why this specific population, and when we look at where they are developmentally, is that youth are in the stage of constructing their identity, and that construction of identity is through expanding their emotional and social skills through their peer groups. And so as well in this stage, there's a very healthy separation between youth and their parents, that they are needing to explore and invest in these new social groups and rely less on their parents. And so now with school and with in-person social interactions taken away at this critical developmental period of their identity, it's normal for parents to see more emotional dysregulation in their teens, more regression to like a younger stage in development, right? Because they're just coping, and then increased moments of acting out and rebelling because they're not getting their needs met, those social and developmental needs, because they're being confined in a household when really they're needing to be out and building their identity with their peer group, but it's not safe. But developmentally, now they're stuck and they're even closer to their parents, which they're supposed to be like slowly, healthily detaching from. So then all these like behaviors come out. And so now, in terms of marginalized youth, the construction of like a positive identity is central in being resilient later in life, because there's that increased chances of discrimination or disadvantages or violence. And so really for marginalized youth, like seeking connection and finding a community to explore and affirms one identity is the utmost importance during this critical developmental period. So an example of this is the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, where research has shown that youth from this marginalized identity need affirmation during this period from their peers, the parents, and society to construct that healthy, positive identity so that they can be resilient. And so what has happened through the pandemic, sadly, is this forced isolation. And sometimes in this forced isolation is taken away their safe space, whether that is in the community or in schools, those like outside supports that are affirming that identity, and they can be their authentic selves. And then being in isolation with their family, we know that some youth who are identifying a part of this marginalized community, and when their parents aren't accepting of this identity, there's increased violence within the home. And then youth are actually acting out in self-harming behavior, increased suicidal ideation, because statistics show that with parental rejection of this specific identity, it actually increases the likelihood by 50% of teens for the risk of suicide before the age of 18.
That's scary. Those are terrifying numbers.
It's very scary. And so that's why like these peer groups and these safe spaces in the community or school are so critical right now, because they need that feeling of belonging. And so many youth have been adapting and coping with, if they have access to technology and the internet, which some do not, right? And we kind of we sometimes like to overthink, like to think that everyone has this access, but in reality,
they don't.
Yeah, right. And so the youth have been finding many online communities in various forms to seek connection and acceptance, and this is great. But then there's also downfalls in this coping strategy, because there's this imbalance that poses for their mental health of too much screen time, right?
Yeah.
Disconnection from the present moment. So that can likely increase anxiety. And then
overstimulation.
Yeah. And then also self-esteem is impacted, because then we focus on the number of likes, comments on social media posts. And then sadly, the increased likelihood of being prey to online predators, because we're spending so much time in seeking that connection, and we can fall into like a trap potentially.
Yeah, very vulnerable. Yeah. That's scary. I hope, like, I'm glad that you and Christine started this boost for youth group, because it came in at such a critical time, and it's for the perfect age range, 14 to 19. Is it 19? How is that going? Like, are you guys seeing a lot of engagement?
So with Boost, just so everyone's aware, it's this like psychoeducation program that we developed here when we saw that there was a gap in services. And so it was to help support youth during like this difficult time. And so it was free for the accessibility. We really wanted it to be in person, so we had lower numbers. And then it consisted of 5 workshops, which was providing education, critical conversation, and then reflection through art making that explored like emotions, anxiety, boundaries, goal setting, and self-care. And so the biggest thing, because we've run this 3 times now, is that the youth have always told us that they really enjoyed the critical conversations that focused around normalizing mental health and the emotions and what they may be feeling, so they don't feel so alone and isolated. The next thing they really pointed out was the routine of it being once a week, which provided them this sense of normalcy and consistency, right, that we're all lacking right now.
Yeah.
And then the social setting of interacting with other youth, right? And seeing like, oh, they're also struggling with anxiety. Oh, this adult who's facilitating this program is talking about how they're having anxiety with COVID and with this different thing. Like, it really like connects us through that vulnerability. And so what's interesting is that vulnerability and courage live beside each other. So if we have a safe space to be vulnerable, then courage steps in, because we were able to say something and get that nice feedback and feel courageous in doing so, because we got that need met during that day.
Yes, very much. That was very Brene Brown. I love her.
Yes, and you know what? There's power in vulnerability, and so many people are scared of being vulnerable because they may have had past experiences where people have used that in a negative way against them. But especially now, with everyone like suffering at different levels, it's really bringing us and connecting us together. That's
awesome. How else does, or you in particular, how does your work kind of at Family Service Regina support youth? Because not only do you do that boost group, but you also, you know, kind of facilitate some art therapy or offer art therapy. Tell me a little bit about that, because I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so I provide like regular counseling services like that, talk therapy, and then also I have a master's in art therapy, so I provide that. And a lot of people like ask, what is art therapy? Or there's a lot of stereotypes because it's so new that art therapy is only for kids or only for people who don't talk. And that's not true. Art therapy is actually used for everyone. So I came up with this like definition to try to like really get to the root of it, and then I'll like explain it deeper. But
okay, cool.
My personal definition of what art therapy is that art therapy integrates psychology and the creative process of art making to provide an alternative approach to addressing, processing, and mending social, emotional, and psychological difficulties. Art therapy utilizes the power of visual expression to externalize those distressing thoughts, those feelings, those painful memories and experiences to help clients aid in closure, increase their self-awareness, and promote verbal expression. And again, anyone can benefit from art therapy, no matter the age, ability, or artistic experience. And so some people have a fear like, I'm not an artist, I can't do art therapy. And it's like, no, it's about expressing ourselves. It's a little squiggle, but if you can tell me a story about that, that was art therapy, because maybe without that squiggle or doing that quick drawing, you wouldn't have tapped into something and been able to explore it verbally, right? And so in therapy, mental health professionals utilize different approaches and theories to help our clients, right? So we might use different forms of like CBT, narrative therapy, solution focus, psychodynamic, and the list goes on. And so art therapy uses all those same approaches and theories, but we deepen the reflection by incorporating art therapy into the conversation. So a session, someone might be talking about an experience, and then I might just stop them and be like, can you just like get that feeling out or draw that experience right now? And so what happens with that is that they're able to slow down, they're able to externalize it from their body onto that piece of paper. Then we're able to take that piece of paper or that sculpture or that painting, and then me and the client can look at that, and then that problem or that experience isn't stuck in the body. We can look at it objectively and like problem solve, or like, because what happens a lot of the time is that when we experience something, we over-identify with it, and then we think that we are that type of person. Well, I'm always angry. I must be an angry person. I must be a bad person because I'm always angry. Well, if we can somehow externalize that anger and then look at it and be like, that's a really difficult emotion. And then we can problem solve, like, when does this show up? How does this change us? How does this push people away? How are we trying to get our needs met, right? And then the client has some like emotional distance versus thinking, I must be bad or something's wrong with me because I'm always angry. Yeah. So it works with everyone. But again, a lot of our inner critics come in and be like, I'm not an artist, I can't draw a dog. And it's really not about that. It's not about that.
Actually, I love painting. Whenever I'm upset, I'm at home and I'm painting. I'm usually, painting something weird, but I'm painting. So, and I don't care because it makes me happy. So I totally get how that would work. And I actually remember the first time I met you, you were telling this story about these rocks. You had a group, right? In your art therapy group, was that what it was? And you had this rock. What is that? Tell me about that again. That was such a cool thing. Pop it in there, don't you?
Give me one moment. So,
cool, yay, I get to see it.
Yeah. So in art therapy, this is something I do. Not every art therapist is going to do this, and normal like counselors or psychologists may do this as well. But I really like natural objects because I feel like through technology, we get really disconnected from nature a lot of times. Mm-hmm. So I have this like really nice sand from Good Spirit Lake that I really love. So I have this sand tray. It's for kids, for adults, for seniors, everyone. And usually in the first session, because when you ask someone like, hey, like, what's going on? Tell me more about you. What's going on in your life? People are like, right? And then it's really scary. You're in front of this stranger and you're expected to talk and like
about yourself,
thing, right? And so it's like, where do I start? How do I describe myself, right? And then I have this little treasure chest, and it's full of like different like rocks and gems and seashells.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what I ask people is that I'm like, hey, like, you know what? I want to know more about you. Can you look at the rocks, whatever rock like stands out to you, pick it, and then like, describe yourself using the rock, right? And because we're using this technique of projection, it's a lot safer because it's over here. And we can be like, well, today I'm feeling like a lot of anxiety, like this rock, there's all these like points going everywhere and it feels fractured and whatnot. And they place it in like the sand tray.
I love that.
Yeah. And so
I love that. That's so unique.
And then it's easier to talk about different supports or different people in our lives, because we can be like, oh, there's this person in my life that's really pointy and I really like care about them, but whenever I try to get close to them, it feels like they poke me or like trigger me in this way, right? So we can like move things around the tray or find different rocks for different emotions or how we connect with different people. And it just feels a lot safer and feels a lot natural than sometimes being in our bodies, which can be a really scary place for some people.
Yeah, I love that. And that is such a great icebreaker too, to use with people. Like that it can be so intimidating to sit there in front of a group of people and start talking about yourself. So
exactly. And so back to your question, because we got a little off track.
It's
but
okay.
Before I became an art therapist, I was a teacher for 3 years. And so I really looked at kids in the classroom, and I really noticed that mental health struggle with a lot of kids that wasn't being met. And that's what got me into like the mental health field. But in education, we're taught like brain development and how kids learn and everything. And so when COVID hit, I was really worried about students and their academic learning. And so what obstacles youth are facing now in terms of school is really like frightening, in that the first thing is change fatigue. With a lot of the teens here in Regina and just like everywhere else, it's like the pandemic happened, they were removed from school within days, right? They had to shift to online learning, which is a whole different world, right? And then they were back to school, but then there was classroom isolations because someone brought in COVID at that one class and they had to isolate for 2 weeks. And so the change back and forth. And then with high schools now moving to like a quint system of being like, you're only taking 2 classes. It's only going to be for like 6 weeks. It's going to be really intense. It's going to be 2.5 hours each day per class. Like that's a whole lot of changes. Mm-hmm. And then some people are back to remote learning, and then some high schools, if they're big, they have to split up the grades by like every other day. So there's so many changes happening, and we know that human beings, we need routine, we need consistency to feel like really regulated. And so how that comes in to learning is that we have these three different levels of our brains. So we have our survival brain, right? Which is the whole idea is like to keep us safe. Then we have our logic brain, which is how we can connect with people, we can problem solve, and we can intake and remember information. And as a teacher, we want all our students to be in that logic brain as much as possible. And then on top, we have our emotional brain, which is when our emotions take over and our logic brain shuts down and we're reactive, we're living in that like intense emotion and nothing else matters, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens with learning is that if we're in that emotional brain because we have anxiety due to COVID, or we're feeling fatigued, or we're just angry at the world, right? We're living up here. And then even if we're in a classroom, we can't learn because we're up here. And then the same thing is that if we go down into our survival brain because we feel like we're unsafe, which a lot of us do in public places or whatnot, then we can't learn either because the brain shuts off and it's like, how do I keep myself safe? Do I need to run? Do I need to fight? Do I need to freeze? Right? And so we see a lot of kids in class just like freezing and they're not intaking any information. And then with all these changes, it's like, how is anyone learning or really benefiting? And then there's all this pressure for high school students that your marks are going to matter to get into post-secondary. Your marks are going to matter. But then we do all these changes and they're all dysregulated and they're not learning.
Aww, that's so terrible to think of it that way. You know, you think of it, or I have thought of it like, oh, that must be so difficult to, you know, try it. But putting it into perspective like that, and you're right, like your survival brain, your logical brain, and I love that so much. That's such a good way to put it so that, you know, to make other people understand.
Yeah. And then another way to understand if you're like a parent or an adult or even like teens is that imagine being at like a normal test. You have studied all night, you feel like you know it, you know the content, you get into the classroom, your anxiety starts building, right? Because there's pressure to do well and whatnot. And so you write your name down, you start that test, and then you blank on like the third question. And then you're like, oh no, I know that. And then you start leaving that logical brain into that emotional brain because you're like, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to do well. I work so hard, and you're going up, 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 right? And then you go to the next question and then you blank. The next question you blank because your memory is actually like starting to get cut off when you go into your emotional brain. And then you hand in that test, you're not feeling good about it because you were blanking or you should have known those answers. You walk out of the classroom, and then once you feel more regulated,
they all come to you.
It all comes because you're now moved into your logical brain, your memory has opened up, and all of those come flooding in. So the one thing that I help with teens is this 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And so what it does is that when we're in our emotional brain or in our survival brain, when we use it, we try and bring ourselves back to that logical brain so that we can really optimize our logic, our problem solving, making connections. So what that looks like is that if you're sitting in front of a test or in like a stressful interview or whatnot, when you start experiencing that anxiety, is what are 5 things that I can see around me right now? And you can name those in your head so no one needs to know that, right? I can see my pencil on my desk, I can see my desk, I can see the teacher, right? And then 4 things that you can touch or feel, right? So maybe I feel the tightness of my shoes, I feel the necklace around my neck, I can touch the wood on the desk, right? And then we go 3 things that you can hear. And so maybe it is just writing. Ticking clock, right? And then 2 things that you can smell. And now with masks, usually we can smell our own breath. That's okay because we're just spending 30 seconds with that sense and checking in with our bodies to bring ourselves down.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, what's one thing that you can taste? That might be coffee, that might be a food we ate, that might just be our saliva, right? And so that takes an easy 1 minute. But sometimes that's all it needs, that our body to like calm down and notice that we're in a present moment, we're feeling safer, we looked around, and now we can do really well on that test.
That's great for panic attacks and anxiety too. I think it's a bit of a longer process, but that's even better for somebody who might be having a panic attack or experiencing overwhelming anxiety, right? Because yeah, like it forces you into your body to focus on other things. So I love that.
And then also, when I work with parents, I teach them that too, because they have a child who's acting out or having a meltdown. Well, that activates us. And so if parents can do that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for themselves so that they can regulate, and then they can be more present to help their child, and then they can also help their child
feel regulated. Yeah. Right? I love that. I think that's great. That's actually something that I might implement in my own life when I'm reactive to my naughty teenage boy. What can caregivers do to support their youth during these challenging times? So like that kind of works for marginalized youth in schools, but how like we could kind of transfer that into the home as well. But are there other things that caregivers can do?
So there's 3 things that I would recommend. And one is really being, for a caregiver, is being that role model, right? So role model in that emotional regulation, being more transparent in that process, because kids need to see that, you know, adults from time to time do experience like an emotion, but they need to see it peak and then come down in how their caregiver regulates. Because in the past, a lot of children have seen a parent start getting upset, and then the parent walks away, which is great for the parent to regulate themselves. But then as that kid develops their emotional competencies, they don't know what happens after because they don't have any role models. So they start ramping up in that meltdown, and they truly believe that they're not going to come down from it because they haven't seen a role model like their caregiver come down from it in front of them.
Interesting.
So it's actually very valuable to be able to show your children or your teens that mom or dad or grandma or aunt or uncle can get upset, but then come down in front of them. But make sure that role modeling happens when you know that you can come down safely, and that it's not like a really big
blowout. Yeah,
like those small moments of teaching, because we are social beings, so we learn through our attachments. So they're constantly observing us as well. With that, constantly observing our caregivers, they're noticing what we're doing for coping. So we need to really emphasize how we are coping and include them in the process. So if you cope by going for a walk, take your teen, your children for that walk and be like, see, mommy was feeling really stressed out. I need to get out of the house and go for a walk. Now I'm feeling really calm. Do you feel calm? Like,
that's what I do with my son. Actually, we go hiking. So
including them in our already established coping strategies, because that could be like projects or some cleaning or whatnot.
Hiking. There's lots of different things.
But it like connects us when we're feeling so disconnected, right? And so just remember, our children pick up on our stress, and then it can cause more conflicts in the home, right? And so the second thing that I really recommend is creating new rituals in the household, right? Because we all thrive off of knowing what to expect and routines. And so what I mean by new rituals is like maybe incorporating like a weekly game night or a weekly movie night, or a Zoom check-in with the extended family, or a themed family supper on a specific day. Something that everyone in the household can look forward to, and that they know that for this hour, we're all connecting through this way. And it brings people closer together than not knowing what's going to happen in the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that routine and a stable environment, right? So
yeah, and like just trying to create as much normalcy in an unknown world as possible is going to help everyone, right?
mm-hmm.
Increasing our compassion for ourselves, our children, and our partners, because we're going to have shorter fuses because we're fatigued, we're dealing with a lot, right? So just checking in with ourselves today and asking ourselves, what's one thing that I need to do for me today,
Mm-hmm.
right? To make myself feel that much better. And the thing is that when we ask ourselves that question, I really want to be intentional on not asking, what do I need today to get rid of that discomfort? That's not what I'm asking myself. It's, what do I need today so that I can show up as a partner, show up as a parent, show up as a friend, show up as a son or daughter? Like, what's one little thing? And that can be like 5 minutes. But you're spending time
to somebody who might not know what, maybe they ask themselves, oh, well, there's something, what do I need? What sorts of things do you suggest?
Well, it's really about this word that I love is curiosity, and that people are really uncomfortable sometimes with curiosity because they're like, I don't know what I mean, and that and I ask them. So there's two things. When you don't know what you need, it can either be a really scary thing because I should know what I need, or we can come from a place of curiosity and be like, I don't know what I need, but let's try some different things and explore and see what works, what feels good, and what I don't need.
Yeah.
And so with that, I like to look at it holistically in that, is there something spiritually that I need, right? Do I need to connect with my religion, with nature, with my creativity? Is that what I'm missing today? Or am I missing something mental? Is there something that I need to like research or be passionate about, or play like a board game and get that competitive drive, or learn something new? Is that what I'm missing? Or is that emotional component? Am I just needing a hug? Am I just needing like a good cry to like my favorite sad movie, right? And then the other one is like physical, right? Which our society really focuses on, right? Do I need to get moving? Do I need to leave the house? Do I need to just slow down and take a nap? Because sometimes our bodies just need that nap and that permission to be like, we don't have to feel guilty for taking a nap just to slow down, because that's what we need right now. So looking at those 4 components and being curious, what needs are really met well that I do daily, and what needs have I not connected with in a while and I might have to boost.
I love that. And explaining it that way too, in the 4 kind of different components.
I would like for everyone to remember that through this pandemic, we become collectively stronger from adapting and becoming aware of what is working and what's not, right? And that can be in our own lives, in our family systems, or in our like work organizations, or in our communities, because this really challenged us, like what's working, what needs to be changed, and how can we adapt it, right? So there's all this strength coming forward. And then this whole experience reminds us about what we truly value in our lives. And because all these things have been taken away, what things we need to focus more on after we come out of this pandemic, right? Is that more social connection? Is that more community engagement? Is that more me time and connecting with what my life purpose is or whatnot? So I think this is a really beautiful time about a lot of self-reflection on what we need more in our lives when we come out of this. Just right now, it feels really intense because we're still in it.
But I think with you by their side, or if anybody does need support, I think that people will come out of it quite well, because you're pretty great. So thank you for an awesome interview today, Dillon. We went a little bit over time, but that's okay, because I was having a blast learning about you and the things that you do. So thank you, and we'll be back again.
Thank you.